thought I'd make a quick video about my thoughts on the Lumix GX1, which I've been using for some of the small bag challenges I've done recently. And I have the camera here with me. So it's something you would have seen if you've watched any of my recent videos. The things I really wanted to say about this camera, partly are about why I enjoy using it, really. It's a camera that I came across because previously I'd been using Micro Four Thirds cameras, used G1, G3, Lumix G1, G3, etc. And I'd ended up with something. I had a compact, an LX5, a Lumix LX5, which I really liked, but I wanted something where I could change lenses, something a little bit more adaptable from a lens perspective. So I actually bought, prior to this, I actually bought a GF1, and that was a camera I enjoyed using. And I guess I really only went to the GX1 because I was looking for some improvements. Partly, I think this is probably a better sensor. I know it's more megapixels. There's nothing wrong with the sensor in the GF1, I don't think. I've got some of my favourite photos from the GF1. Nothing wrong with them at all. So that wasn't the primary reason for moving to the GX1. But I also wanted a level gauge. I'm one of these people who has a lot of trouble, it seems, spotting the horizon when I'm composing. So I did want a level gauge, and this has a what I consider to be possibly the best level gauge that I've seen in cameras. I think it's better than the one that Olympus offer on theirs, and I think it's better than the Fuji one as well. So it's got a good level gauge. So I'd probably just had enough with the GF1, I guess. And this is smaller, lighter, and in some respects better, in my opinion. Things that I miss over the GF1 are it doesn't have the drive selector. On the GF1, the drive selector is around the mode switch, I think. And so, for example, you can put it into 2-second timer, for example, using just a switch on the top plate. And that's moved to the menus now. You can access it through the quick menu and the like, or through a button on the back. But I don't like that way of operating it quite as much. So that's a little bit of a, not so good. Things that are better about this camera, or other things that are better about this camera, is it is smaller, lighter. The grip is better on it. This sort of fairly heavily sculptured piece here is definitely better for getting hold of. I do sometimes use this thumb grip thing, which generally I don't use on cameras, but it makes this one definitely into a one-handed shooter, which is not that I advocate shooting one-handed very often, but sometimes it can be useful. Something I have used on this camera, which is definitely better, is the accessory EVF. I think it's the EVF 2 or something. The GF1 has the earlier one, which isn't as good. Having said that, the EVF for this, obviously you can't use it with the grip in place, with the thumb grip, but the EVF on this, whilst it's okay, it's passable, it's not as good as the one on my Olympus cameras. And getting into a little bit about the Olympus cameras, because I've also been using for the last few years an Olympus EP5, and the EP5 has a better screen, much better resolution on the screen. It has a better EVF. It has IBIS. It has Wi-Fi, if that's important to you. I don't use Wi-Fi. And arguably, I think the general feeling amongst photographers is that the JPEGs coming out of Olympus cameras are better than the JPEGs out of Panasonic's. I tend not to use just JPEG only. I do sometimes shoot JPEG and RAW, but I almost always shoot RAW anyway, so that's not really a thing for me. What else did I want to say about this? Yeah, I guess the other thing, one other thing I wanted to say that's not such a good point is these little buttons, this little four-way, the four-way controller thing, and the other buttons on the back they're not as pronounced, the little buttons are not as pronounced as they are on the GF1, and also, you probably can't see it that well from here, so I'll do a little bit of a close-up-y thing at some point. You can almost not see what's written on these. It's like it's it's almost like it's engraved onto the buttons themselves. So it's really difficult to see, particularly in poor lighting, what each button actually does. I guess you get used to that. What I had found using this camera for the small bag challenges that I've done, firstly, I really like the simplicity of this camera. I just use it as an everyday pick up and use thing. It's really easy to use, really simple. The menus, I know people complain about the menus on every camera system just about. They are very simple on this though. There's nothing tricky in there. Although you can do things like setting your own custom settings and things in your own custom film simulations if you want to. And I've done some of that. And I've covered that in other videos using some of Matti Salanto's sort of black and white recipes for high contrast JPEGs and the like. So you can do more complicated stuff in this if you want to, but it's the simplicity of it as a pick it up and just chuck it over your shoulder camera that really appeals to me. And because this has been my primary Lumix camera for a long time, and it was I enjoyed using it on my small bag challenges for on each of those that I did where I used this camera, it was the use of this camera that spurred me on to look at more current sort of offerings from Panasonic, and hence that's the reason we're now shooting this video on the Lumix G80, which I bought as my primary video camera. So yeah, GX1's got a lot to answer for. GX1 is staying with me for now because I enjoy using it. Olympus EP5 may be a better camera in some respects, but that one's out the door. It's going. As much as I've enjoyed it, I don't think I need two cameras that are so similar. Obviously, this doesn't have some of the features that the Olympus has, the EP5 has, and it's probably not as good a camera, but I enjoy using it, and I think that's probably the main thing. So this one stays, the Olympus goes. Yeah, there we are. My thoughts on using a Lumix GX1 in 2022, because I think this is now 11 years old. I think these came out in 2011. So it's, in digital camera terms, it's quite an old camera now, but I'm still enjoying using it. One other thing that I should say about it is that the battery life on this camera, now I've got over the problems I had with battery messages, battery life is really good on it. Really, really good. I'll include one or two pics where I've used... One thing to say about the accessory viewfinder, the EVF, was I did use it at... I did try using it at Brands Hatch with the 100 to 400 Panaleica lens on this, just to see how I got on. And the refresh rate on the EVF is definitely too slow, really. And it was a real struggle. I might include one or two pics at the end of this video just to show that it is possible, but boy did it feel like hard work. Whereas the EP5 was a camera that I felt was actually a stand-in should the EM1 ever let me down. This, not so sure, but I'm hoping not to go there in terms of needing a backup body, so that's not something I'd generally look to use it for anyway. And the other thing to say about this camera is I was really surprised how good the video is coming from this. It's actually, I think it manages to keep focus almost as well as this G80 does, which is a little bit bizarre. I mean, I haven't used it in anything, in any sort of extreme circumstances. I only used it for a bit of, very casual vlogging, but it seemed to actually cope better than I was expecting. So that was good. It's nice to know that the 10 years between this and the G80 have resulted in some improvements. Perhaps. I'm sure they have. Yeah. So there we are. My thoughts on the GX1 and why I'm continuing to use it to this day, and will continue for a while as I enjoy it.